Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it will be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! First story. Noisy neighbors get silenced. Back in the 80s, I lived in a flat in southeast London. The flat was located in a small tower block 10 stories high with 4 flats per floor, one per corner as it were, and the flat overlooked a local park and afforded very nice views of the area. The neighbors were generally very amenable, but everybody tended to keep to themselves. So no one had any problems with anyone. That all changed when a new family moved into a flat down on the second floor on the same corner of the building where we lived. We lived on the X. They were not the most gracious of individuals, frequently leaving rubbish bags strewn around their floor's lobby for days, rather than depositing them in the communal bins, and parking their cars in other residents' allocated parking spots. In other words, the epitome of the appellation chav. Complaints to the local council invariably fell on deaf ears. They soon developed a reputation for hosting loud drunken parties on the weekends, which tended to go past midnight. This was pretty freaking annoying for us and the other residents, but we were somewhat less affected due to the distance between our respective flats. One particular Friday evening, however, proved to be the straw that broke the camel's back. At around 10 p.m. we heard the music start up, but it now appeared that the host had recently purchased a new sound system, because the bass was now intolerably loud. I can only surmise that a peculiarity of the building's design, coupled with what sounded like much larger bass speakers, appeared to magnify the effect in our bedroom to the point where it made it quite impossible to sleep. At about 11:30 p.m. I trotted downstairs and knocked on their door. It was flung open by what I could only assume to have been the male resident, looking somewhat the worse for wear. I politely asked him if he'd mind turning the music down as it was very loud, rattling the furniture in my flat and making it difficult to sleep. Get lost! Door slams. Charming, I thought. So I went back upstairs and called a non-emergency police number and explained the situation. They assured me that someone would be around in due course. Being a Friday night, I reckoned it might take an hour or two. So with much wailing and gnashing of teeth, we sat there waiting for the cops to rock up. Sure enough, about an hour later, I saw a patrol car pull up and a couple of London's finest enter our building. A few moments later, the music gets turned down and the police leave. No sooner had the car disappeared up the street then the music went back up to its previous level. We endured it for another half hour, no change. So once again I called the cops. This time it takes closer to 2 hours for them to turn up. Yep, definitely a busy Friday night. They finally arrived around 3 a.m. and once again, the music is reduced to a sensible level. Unfortunately, shortly after they depart, back up goes the volume to its previous furniture-shaking intensity. As you might imagine, by now I was royally angry. Indoors too. Someone not normally prone to displays of anger was positively foaming at the mouth, and looked like she was single-handedly going to reenact the Battle of Austerlitz in glorious technicolor together with full orchestral accompaniment. It was then that I had a dazzling idea. One so fiendishly cunning and yet devilishly simple. A guaranteed cast iron 100% pure 24-karat stunker of an idea, so brilliant that I felt certain that within a few minutes I could stop this once and for all, and execute my plan in such a way as to make it impossible to trace back to me. Cue maniacal cackling whilst twirling imaginary mustache. Grabbing my toolkit, I crept down the stairwell to the second floor, just to double-check the actual flat number. Having confirmed the number, I went back up to the fourth floor, and in the stairwell just next to the exit door to the fourth floor lobby was a wooden access door that concealed one of the two electrical distribution panels for the entire building. The door was only secured by a simple square key fitting, and the application of a large flat plate screwdriver would pop the latch no problem. Thus, I opened the door to reveal the distro itself. Pulling the cover open, I was presented with a large panel containing 20 large 80-amp fuses, one each for the lower set of flats. Each one was neatly labeled with a flat's number, and it was but a moment to locate the appropriate one. Now, by one of those happy coincidences that usually only occur in the more egregious examples of the Hollywood B-movie, I just happened to have in my toolkit a dead fuse of exactly the same type and capacity. A few weeks previously, I'd had to replace a similar fuse in a theater where I worked, and I'd absent-mindedly tossed the dead fuse in my toolbox, where I'd promptly forgotten about it until now. Now, with all my ducks in a neat row, I pulled the fuse carrier for the miscreant flat out. Instant blessed silence. I rapidly swapped the live fuse for the dead one, and reinserted the carrier. Securing everything back up again, I casually strolled back upstairs to enjoy a few hours in hallowed arms of Morpheus. Addendum. Some weeks later, the troublesome family were moved out of their flat. It transpired that the local council had received so many noise complaints over the previous 6 months that they were obliged to rehouse them elsewhere. Next story. He's supposed to be sitting an example. Years ago, when I was attending Naval Nuclear Power School in Orlando, my best friend and I were involved in an incident at the Navy Exchange on base. It was payday, so after class, my friend and I headed over to the exchange to cash out checks and pick up a few things. The exchange was part of a cluster of shops with a covered area connecting them. With the blazing Florida sun that day, there was quite a crowd gathered in a shaded area. As we were headed for the door of the exchange, we saw a well-dressed late middle-aged woman carrying a large number of packages trying to get through the door. Why she didn't have a card for all her packages, I have no clue. My friend and I each grabbed one side of the double doors and opened them for her. And just as she's coming through the door, a lieutenant junior grade comes charging through, nearly knocking her off of her feet and sending her packages flying. The lieutenant joins with a cluster of other junior officers having a bull crap session. I catch the woman's arm to steady her, and once she's regained her balance, I run to get a shopping cart while my friend starts gathering up her packages. When I return a moment later, we put all of her packages in the cart and present it to the woman. She gives us a huge smile and thank you. My friend is a bit of a smart mouse and sees that the offending lieutenant is still bull crapping with his buddies, and he pitches his voice loud enough that he's sure the lieutenant will hear and says, "Our pleasure, ma'am. Some of us do not require an act of Congress to be gentlemen." Even though I'm laughing at this verbal barb, alarm bells are sounding in my head. Sure enough, the lieutenant has indeed heard then, is striding our way, red-faced and breathing fire. My friend and I pop to attention, and he proceeds to ream us each a new one. I must admit his command of profanity was impressive, and coming from a sailor, that's saying something. During this tirade, I noticed that the lady we assisted has pushed her cart over to another small group of officers, talking to them, and pointing in our direction. One of the officers detaches himself from the group and comes striding, I swear. I had never seen as many scrambled eggs gold braid on a hat in my life, and his shoulder boards have 2 stars. It is a base commanding officer. Oh my god. We're done for now. My friend and I are starting to reach out for our IDs and getting ready to be put on report. He looks at us and says, "Gentlemen, thank you for assisting my wife. You may go now." We snap out salutes and a brisk yes sir, and beat feet into the exchange. We look back through the glass wall to see the lieutenant standing at a very rigid attention, while the admiral reduces him to a quivering bottle. I don't know what happened after that, but it's likely that he had very limited advancement potential and wasn't very happy with the choices of duty stations he had available to him. Next story. My mother ruins an anti-vaxxer Karen and her cronies. Background. The subject of this story is my mother. I will call her Amber. She's in her late 70s and works for a women's clothing store which caters specifically to older clientele. She's been working for this particular company for some 20 years now. The manager of this store is the absolute epitome of a Karen. So let's call her Karen. Extremely entitled, short-haired, chumpy, cheats on her husband, and a blatant backstabber. Because the store is staffed by mostly older women, cliques tend to form. It is basically high school. Yes, older women can be that pity. And naturally, Karen has her own cronies. During periods where no one is in the store, there also tends to be a ton of gossip, important for later. The assistant manager, let's call her Jackie, is also one of Karen's lackeys and she's such a sucker-up to Karen. If Karen does something, then Jackie isn't far behind, etc. Amber is a bit of a bullbuster, and she has zero tolerance for garbage in her personal life. Over the years, she has tried to stay impartial when it comes to her work. However, because to her it's all about professionalism, she also has empathy, which is something that seems to be in short supply with these other women. It also helps that she has been the top seller for her district for some 10 years running despite working part-time. Karen and Jackie absolutely hate her for it. So much so that Karen routinely schedules her for hours which are not especially good. Despite this though, Amber still has her loyal clientele. She always comes out on top against the other sales associates in total sales almost every quarter. As expected, this naturally feeds a horrible feedback loop with Karen and Jackie. When COVID hit, the company decided to cut all commission for sales associates. The commission was one of the main reasons why Amber endured Karen and Jackie's nonsense. While she only made slightly above the state's minimum wage, with a commission she could double or even triple that amount on good days. According to her, no other retailer in the area offers this kind of system, and it's pretty unlikely that the company will reinstate it even after COVID ends. Along with the cut in wages, the store was also forced to decrease the amount of hours that they could offer to their associates. Karen took this as a way to essentially bar Amber from working at the store. While other associates were getting 8 to 10 hours a week, Amber would see maybe 6 if she was lucky, and they would be during times of low customer traffic. Karen could get away with this because the district manager is also in her pocket. Along with the reduced hours and the removal of commissions, the store naturally had a mandatory mask policy for all the employees and customers. Karen and her lackeys would often whine and complain about how unnecessary this was because according to them, COVID is a hoax, and wearing masks makes you subservient to the government. There were a few incidents where Karen would let people without masks into the store despite the state and company mandates. Amber refused to rock the boat, however, so when this would happen, she would go into the back of the store and stay as far away from these people as possible. During this period in time, a friend of the family and good friend of Amber's passed away due to complications from COVID. The funeral was set for a time when Amber was scheduled to work, so she called out that day. Karen and Jackie attacked Amber and the deceased, claiming that she must have caught the flu or been in bad health, and that Amber was feeding into the lie. Oh, how nice it must be to live such a privileged life. Not long after, a few of the store's loyal clients also passed away from COVID, and still Karen and Jackie, along with her groupies, maintain their narrative in the most vindictive way possible. Every time someone died, it must have been because of bad life choices or bad health. Never was it attributed to the global pandemic that was claiming thousands of people a day, according to Karen and her groupies. Recently, the COVID restrictions have started to lift and many of the clientele and employees have gotten their vaccines. This included submitting paperwork to show that you have indeed obtained the vaccine, or a note from a doctor explaining why you couldn't have one. Not Karen nor Jackie though. To them, getting the vaccine would be like pumping poison into their veins. Instead, they decided to use fake COVID white cards with their information, effectively forging the documents. Amber, however, has suggested multiple times that they just get the vaccines because it's something that is mandated by the company. All the employees must get vaccines when they are available. And given that almost all of the employees are above the age of 60, they have been eligible for the shots for months now. Recently, Amber had an emotional conversation directly with Karen where she expressed her concern for her. "I just want you and your family to be safe, so please get the vaccine." Karen responded with her normal snide attitude, of course. A few days later, however, Karen sent a text message mentioning that she had finally got the vaccine. She didn't. Amber replied that it was great and that she was happy for her. And Karen just replied with a GIF of some guy flipping the bird. This was the beginning of the end for Amber. The incident. During one of her shifts, Amber overheard Karen and Jackie discussing how Amber was a jerk and a cheap who bought the story about how Karen had taken the vaccine. During that same shift, Amber was working with a customer in the back and some woman came into the store and stole a couple items of clothing, probably totaling out to be $100 at most. Now, it is company policy that during all shifts, there will always be at least 2 employees in the store, and during this particular stretch of time, Jackie was the only other person in the store. According to the video cameras, Jackie was up in front of the store playing with her phone when this woman came in. Normally, if someone steals items from the store, the protocol is to avoid confronting them and instead just call security after they have left the store. This is mainly to avoid lawsuits and to protect the employees should these people choose to get violent. It has happened in the past. That evening, Amber received a call from Karen telling her that she was on probation pending an investigation for allowing this woman to steal from the store. Given the company's policy regarding theft, this really made no sense. But Amber truly decided she had had enough. Eventually, this probation led to Amber's dismissal and the official reasoning was fairly vague. The revenge. One thing that I forgot to mention. A few years ago, Amber asked me to teach her how to record things on her phone. And luckily, we live in a single constant state. As such, Amber had recordings of these women backstabbing her and gossiping about rather scandalous things dating back for years. She had gathered quite a collection because you never know when you need to cover yourself. Over the years, Amber has gone to HR to no real avail, even with her recordings. Whether it be because they are also in the bucket of Karen or that they just don't care, remains to be seen. The HR department works directly under the district manager. Amber is also very good at keeping any paperwork and proof of these visits, including some recordings. And she also recorded the call where she was fired. Amber has a ton of very loyal clients who were pretty distraught when they learned of her dismissal. One client in particular runs a column at one of the major newspapers for the nearby city. We will call her Casey. Since Amber was a part-time worker, she did not really have much of a leg to stand on legally when it came to claiming a wrongful dismissal claim by legal means. However, that didn't mean that she didn't have any kind of recourse. She decided to attack the problem from multiple fronts. Amber compiled some of the greatest hits from her recording collection and had me email them off to the corporate offices of the company. specifically to the CEO, CTO, and basically every member of the board of directors. I fired a couple perks off to anyone who had any power that I could find. Along with those recordings, she wrote an email about how Karen, Jackie, and her group of sheep refused to get vaccines and had falsified their vaccine documents to pass the company's standards. Casey then put Amber in touch with a columnist for the newspaper, and they got copies of the recordings, text messages, and the dismissal phone call. They also did an interview which was for an article and a TV slot on the local news. Amber discussed the commission cuts, clear favoritism and lack of any intervention by the HR, forged documents, company policy and the incident and so on. Basically anything relevant to paint these women in a terrible light. Among some of these recordings were bits of gossip that included conversations regarding Karen's various cheating incidents over the years. She was married, and Amber also wrote an anonymous email to the husband that included some of these recordings. The fallout. Crap hit the fan pretty fast, as you can probably imagine. Karen, Jackie, the district manager, and a couple of the groupies were immediately fired and put under investigation for forging documents. While forging a vaccine card isn't really something too serious, it could lead to some pretty hefty fines. There is no specific law against forging the vaccine white cards. However, because the white cards contain the government seal, well, you can just imagine how illegal that might be. Let's just say the FBI has stepped in on this one. One of the recordings featured Karen admitting to using forged cards. After the article and TV slot ran on the local news, the CEO reached out to Amber to formally apologize for the behavior of the HR, the district manager, Karen, and Jackie. She even went so far as to offer Amber a raise, but Amber declined because she found a job that actually paid a fair wage and let her work on her own time. The real witch of it for the CEO and the board was the fact that their employees were breaking the company policy for a store that exclusively catered to older women regarding a virus that tends to kill older people. They got some heavy public backlash for this. Karen's husband seemed to have separated from her after finding out about her infidelity. How whether or not this will lead to a divorce remains to be seen. The best part for Amber, many of her clients started coming to her new store, and again, she's killing it as one of the best sales associates. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.